This is a small cap company, market cap of only around $181 million.
Tiny companies with major momentum.
Revenue was up year over year by an astonishing amount. It's up over $33 million in revenue versus $1.2 million a year ago. That's a huge increase.
MarketBeat's Chris Markoch shares a list of 3 obscure energy stocks that are starting to gain some traction.
They're certainly generating revenue. They've got a $920 million backlog.
Chris, so great to have you back on the show talking about a topic that seems to be something we talk about every year end, and that's energy outlook for the new year ahead. Today, we're talking about obscure energy stocks, which I think is interesting for investors to look at. But before we get into these kind of obscure names that you probably haven't heard of, let's get into the sector as a whole.
Right.
What did energy do in 2025, and what is expected to do in 2026?
You know, the thing with the energy story in 2025 was heading into this year, there was a lot of people that thought this might be the year when you started seeing a real spike in crude oil prices because of the Trump administration coming in. But what you've actually seen is because we've increased production so much in the United States and OPEC has been cutting, but not really cutting, crude oil prices have really been kept down. So that means that if you were in some of the major oil stocks and some of the oil services company, you haven't really seen the pop that you might have expected. Where you're seeing growth is in some renewable companies that you might not have really thought were relevant plays. You're seeing growth in utility companies. So it's not necessarily in the underlying commodity of power, but you're seeing it in the people that actually have to provide the power. And that's kind of the story here when we're looking at these obscure names in the sector.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot this year and late last year, too, about nuclear stocks. This is really more classic energy companies with companies that are coming up with unique solutions to actually providing energy right now and not building out these massive nuclear centers, which that'll be another video for another time. But let's get into the names that you have for us today. I'm excited about the last name we're going to talk about on this list because I've actually had a chance to interview that CEO. So we'll get to that conversation at the end. I'm also, of course, paying attention to see which one of these to add to Bridget's buys. This is going to be a tough one today because these are all names we really haven't talked much about. Let's get to the first company you have on obscure energy stocks to look at.
Right. So these are going to all be small cap names. And for a lot of investors, you know what that means. That means there's going to be some volatility. That's kind of just the price you pay for being in these stocks. But I think there's an opportunity in each one of these. The first one is Enlight Renewable Energy. The ticker symbol is ENLT. Now, this is an Israeli-based company. It's got a renewable energy platform that deals with solar, wind, and energy storage. Now, solar and wind may be something that some investors may look at and say, hey, wait a second, I thought that was on the outs with the Trump administration. And that may be true, but really what the Trump administration is looking at are solar and wind projects that are not profitable or are still in the development stage, but might not ever show anything. That's not the case with Enlight. Enlight already has 20 gigawatts of multi-technology capacity and over 35 gigawatts of energy storage capacity. And this is in projects that span the United States, Israel, and Europe. They are primarily focused on growing their operations internationally, not so much in the United States, but this has been a big winner this year.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. And the first thing that I thought of talking about the Trump administration, this is an international company based in Israel. Just because the Trump administration has policies one way towards renewable energy, I think the rest of the world, especially Europe, is swinging a different way on renewable energy. So there's demand coming from the international markets for sure for this company. I think that's a great point. And I think you're seeing that in the latest earnings report. That's the standout thing about this tiny company that I'd never heard of before. Really impressive earnings.
Yeah, so they reported their Q3 earnings. The revenue was up 46% year over year. Net profit was up 33% at $32 million. They raised their full year guidance for the year. The battery storage capacity grew from 2.1 gigawatt hours in the same quarter of 2022 to over 11.8 gigawatt hours in Q3 of 2025. So that's in a 3-year span. And the stock jumped after the report. It hit a 52-week high at just over $40 a share, and it's pulled back some since, but it's still trading. It's still up 125% for the year.
Yeah, such impressive growth for a
It is.
company like this that's not in an explosive AI field, right? We're talking about energy and wind energy of all things,
Correct.
which is not something that you would expect to see that kind of growth in. So that leads to the next question of, we saw this kind of explosive growth already. Is there still growth potential ahead after such a big jump?
I think the answer there is yes, and I think there's also gonna be what I would also caution investors for is I would say, I think it's reasonable that you can expect a pullback even further from its current level. It was trading up over $40 a share. It's now trading at $38, around $38 as we tape this. I think it could break below the consensus, which right now is $37.50. But that would look like a good buying opportunity. And the reason for that is because when you look at some of the analyst ratings, some of them since earnings, like UBS Group, like Barclays, they have a significantly higher price target than the consensus. And that's something that the stock can grow into over the next 12 months.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it too, that there are some analysts out there who expect this to go even higher than where it
Right.
is now. But I think for investors who are looking at small caps, just remember this isn't the kind of data that you're getting from some of the bigger names that are out there that have lots and lots of different coverage. That consensus is kind of the mid-range of many, many different projections. This is just a few. So that's a good thing to remember with small cap investing. One other thing that just pops into mind with this one in the conversation we just had about it, I'm wondering if retail investors out there might have some questions or concerns about the geopolitical issues, with this being an Israeli-based company, with kind of needing to get more of that growth from other international markets, from other countries,
Mhm.
not necessarily banking on all of their growth coming from the US market. Any thoughts on those geopolitical issues and the impact that could have on this company?
I don't think it's going to be an impact on an institutional level. I think it's hard to predict what a retail investor might do here and there. But I think on the institutional level, the story of this company still focuses around the idea that we're going to need power and we're going to need it in whatever form or fashion we can have. And again, we're not looking at this company as a company that has projects that are in the works. They've already got projects that are producing energy, and that's, I think, the difference here.
You brought up another really important point, and that's institutional ownership. This one only has about 38% institutional ownership. Is that a little low?
Probably not for a stock of this size. Ideally, as a retail investor, you would like to see that institutional ownership up above 50% or even 60%. But at the same time, when you start seeing institutional ownership get up to that level, you also might start seeing the stock become more predictable, let's just say. When the institutions are still down at this level, it still leaves a little bit of room now for the retail investors to get in early, let's just say that.
All right. Really good conversation on this name, one we haven't talked about before. And
Yeah,
again, I just thought it was really interesting,
it is.
especially with that earnings report. That's what I love about this video today. It's those obscure names, which I always find fascinating to look at. But if you are looking for more traditional names in energy, maybe the bigger companies out there, we also have a report for that. Thomas Hughes recently released the 7 top energy stocks to look at for the new year. And those are more traditional names you might expect, and some other ones that are interesting overall in the energy sector. So you can scan the QR code or click the link in the description to take a look at that list of 7 energy stocks to consider for 2026. All right, let's get back to those obscure energy stocks, Chris. What's that second company you have for us today?
Yeah, the second company I have is STEM Inc., and the ticker symbol is STEM, STEM. The interesting part about this company, Bridget, is that it's not really an energy story as much as it's a software story that relates to the energy market. And let me explain that. Again, this is a small cap company, market cap of only around $181 million as we're sitting here taping this. But the stock's up over 100% for this year, and there's got to be a reason for that. The company develops AI-driven software and services for clean energy planning, deployment, and operation. They're Athena software is the most utilized and successful distributed energy resources optimization software in the world. They operate across 55 countries. They have nearly 20 years of experience doing this. So this isn't a new company. It's been around for a long time. But I think right now you've got a situation where the product that they have is meeting the moment because right now, again, the energy need is great. Optimum energy use is of primary importance. And so this is a company that's using AI to help optimize energy loads.
So interesting. This is kind of more of an AI play, even though it's in the energy sector. So,
Correct.
very interesting company. This chart, especially over the last few months, is also very interesting. The last company we looked at was at least this direction, the what
Yeah.
you'd like to see. This chart is a little bit more all over the place. Let's talk about why we're seeing some recent volatility with this one.
The stock charged up. It got up to its 52-week high there in the middle of October, and it's fallen down. I think some of that was just the general sour sentiment towards tech stocks in general. But the stock seems to have found a nice level of support right there around that $13.70 range. It's bounced sharply off of that range. So I think investors in the near term, they can look at that and say that's a very, very secure floor. The stock is trading higher than consensus right now, and analysts are maybe a little bit less bullish, although Roth Capital has a price target of $30 on the stock, and they gave that after the company reported earnings, so there's something to be said there.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Also important to note that I heard in that is that this has exposure to not only the energy sector, but also exposure to whatever's happening in AI. So this
Yeah,
this stock in particular will probably follow that AI market a little bit,
right.
even more so than the energy market. So interesting. The analyst forecast part, again, one analyst looking at $30 for this one is very interesting. But that earnings report, that's a rough one to look at here.
Mm.
It looks like it's quite a miss. Still very much a pre-revenue company, right?
You don't like to see that, and you especially don't like to see that in the case of STEM because back in June, they did a reverse stock split, a 1-for-20 stock split. Normally, you do those sorts of things because you wanna stay in compliance with, NASDAQ requirements. That really wasn't why the company did it because the stock price was well over $10 a share at that point, but investors were already kinda weighing that, and then you have this earnings miss. But again, the company's trying to pivot into a annual recurring revenue model, and that annual recurring revenue, ARR, grew 17% year over year in the last quarter. So they're trying to get to that point where you've got positive operating cash flow. They're also looking to do some cost savings through workforce reductions. So we're going to see, again, this is a very small company. It's in a very niche area. The reason why I include it in the energy area is because the software is exclusively dedicated to the energy sector right now. But it still looks like one of these obscure names, but it's had a big pop this year, and some analysts are saying it could even go higher than it went this year.
Yeah, there's definitely a risk factor to consider with any of the names that we're talking about here. With these obscure stocks, it means risk as well. So I think it's important for investors to know that and look at the accounting practices, look at some of the moves that the company is making, and do your own research and make sure this is something that you want to do before making an investment. One other area that I thought was different about this one than the previous one we just talked about, there does seem to be more institutional ownership with this one. In fact, over 60%.
I would feel comfortable saying that that's because of the AI nature of it. Institutions are buying AI. And so they're looking at this company and saying the software, it's AI software, it's going to pop. What'll be interesting to see is what happens over the next couple of quarters. Does institutional investors stay that high? Do institutions bail on the stock? I don't think they will. And again, because I think the story here is even as we create all this new energy, you still have to have a way to make sure that you're optimizing it. And that's where STEM is coming in.
Yeah. Do you think that this STEM company will continue to follow suit with what's happening in the AI sector, or will they eventually have some exposure to the broader energy market?
No, I think this is still going to be largely an AI play, but again, I think it deserves consideration as an energy stock because it's so hyper focused on just renewable energy companies and that that whole area that is exploding right now.
Yeah, it's impossible to talk about any sector to see that AI is not touching that space. So I think that this is a good stock still to think of as an energy stock, even though it's more in the AI space. All right, Chris, let's get to this third company, and I'm really excited to talk about this one. This is a tiny company.
Yeah, this is Energy Vault. Ticker symbol is NRGV. Another tiny company. Its market cap is only $817 million, so well in that category of small caps. Now, this is a company that they develop utility scale energy storage solutions. Here's where they're different. They're the only company that offers battery-powered gravity and hydrogen storage technologies. That's the interesting part. So they're not just hitting one element of the energy storage equation. They're trying to do all of it. And they've been transitioning themselves into an own and operate model. So that means they're not only owning some of these assets, they're also helping operate them. And that's going to lead to what investors believe is going to lead to high margin, recurring revenue streams over the next few years, which is where the opportunity may lie with this stock.
There's a lot to talk about with this stock and some of the different moves it's had in the last year. We're going to get into that, but I also wanted to share, I find that the concept of this company so fascinating. I actually had a chance to interview the company's CEO last year in November of 2024. I interviewed the Energy Vault CEO, and I thought this company was so interesting. I did a lot of research on it, watched a lot of videos on how their battery systems work, and it is fascinating. Again, the idea of using gravity to help store energy. If you haven't seen that interview yet, go back and watch it. I've got that link in the description as well too, and you can click the corner here to go back and watch that full interview if you're like me and you like to nerd out on the technology part of this and just the ideas for these companies, which I think are great. Let's talk about the idea itself. Do you think that this is actually in full production? I think that's the one thing is this just being tested as a concept, or are they in full operation, making revenue, actually selling this idea to different companies out there?
If we look at their latest earnings report, they're certainly generating revenue. In fact, revenue was up year over year by an astonishing amount. It was up over $33 million in revenue versus 1.2 million a year ago. So that's a huge increase. And what is exciting about this company is they've got a $920 million backlog in projects. So now think about what I just said. They generated $33 million in revenue just in the last quarter. The backlog is $920 million. Just off the top of my head, that's 4 years or more worth of revenue, current revenue, and they've already got that in the backlog. So that suggests to me that there's a really strong growth outlook, and that revenue is coming with a gross margin of about 27%. So the company's not profitable right now, but that would seem to be a situation that's going to resolve itself in the future.
That's other really interesting statistics for this company. And now let's get into the other interesting part, and
Yes.
that is the chart. If we look at it from when I interviewed the CEO last year in November, this stock has been on a ride all
Yep.
the way down to 60 cents, a micro penny stock out
Yep.
there. Talk about what's behind some of those moves.
When you started getting into the beginning of this year, uh, there just became a lot of uncertainty, and small cap stocks are going to do terribly in that market. And as we've noted, this is a very small stock. And so I think that's really what happened. Small caps have been out of favor for quite some time, and it wouldn't surprise me that this stock got hammered like it did. But you can see that right around the April, May point, the stock formed a nice bottom. You can really see that in the chart. It's very clear. And then ever since then, the stock's been growing, and it's been growing really sharply since about September. And I think that's because the evidence is quite clear that the hyperscalers, at least, are still going to be throwing money into these data center projects. So that means that at the very least, these projects have to be built. And that means, again, there's going to have to be There's going to have to be solutions provided for energy storage, and that fits right into what this company does.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see if they start to get some of those contracts for those hyperscaler data center spaces. Gosh, it's so hard to think about which one of these three companies to add to Bridget's buys. I think I want to ask another follow-up question on Energy
Yeah,
Vault in particular, as I'm even considering whether to add this to my
sure.
watch list. The pause that I have with this one is just how sharply it's up in the last few weeks to see that, 113% increase in just 3 months, up almost 50% in the last month. It's quite high right now. Is now a time for investors to be looking at getting in? Can we expect more volatility ahead?
My short answer would be I would expect to see the stock pull back a little bit and maybe even a little bit more than it has right now. It's the RSI of this stock is now just slightly below the overbought range. So that means the stock's probably going to be trending lower for a little bit. I don't know if it's gonna make it all the way back down to its consensus price, which is like $2.67. That would be quite a dip, and I certainly think that would be a buyable dip, but I think investors might not wanna buy it right here at $4.83. They might wanna let that stock come down a little bit, knowing that the stock does have some favorable analyst sentiment. An analyst firm named Fundamental Research, after the company's last earnings report, they gave it a buy rating with a price target of $5.19, which would be well higher than its current 52-week high.
Yeah, I think that's what's so interesting about these small cap stocks is they do kind of go all over the place and in these big 50% swings. I know when that Energy Vault video came out in November of 2024, when we talked to the CEO, the stock was for the time was at one of its higher peaks,
Right.
around 250 or so, and then it crashed so badly the next couple of months. And I know some people were upset to see that quick decline. But
Right.
if you bought in then and you stayed in, now you're at a profit for this company. So it does seem to matter when you get in on some of these smaller, riskier plays, right?
That is always so true, and again, we've said this about the other 2 stocks, it's the same here. Institutional ownership of this stock is only about 40%, and that means it sets itself up for strong volatility in either direction. Um, Short interest is down now. It's down about 16% over the last month. It's only about 5% of the float, but it's been much higher. So anytime you see that kind of lower institutional interest, you're going to see more volatility. That's normal with small cap stocks. That's the ballpark you're playing in, and you've got to be used to that. What you really want to do is if you believe in this company, keep your position size manageable, have your stops in place, know where you want to take profits, and don't be scared to take profits on the way up. That way, you're not really hurting yourself if the stock does take a big move lower.
It's absolutely a different kind of investing
It
than
is.
some of the other companies that we talk about. So it's something to be cautious with for sure. And also evaluate, is this an area I want to be investing in? Or is this not the kind of investing that I want to be a part of? So do some of that research for yourself, do some of that evaluation for yourself of, is this something I want to do? As I'm looking at even just adding this to my paper trading watch list, I am nervous about which one to add because there could be so much
Right.
volatility. I really do like the long-term future of Energy Vault. I do think this company has some potential on the horizon. But like you said, I think the entry point where it's at right now is too high to get in. I think if I wanted to add it to a watch list, personally, I would want it to pull back at least another 30% before I would want to really get in. And maybe it wouldn't be quite a 30% pullback, but a little bit
Right.
more
But
than where it's at right now.
exactly. Exactly.
So I think simply because of some of the things we talked about, I'm going to go with the first one. I'm going to go with Enlight Renewable Energy. And I really liked their earnings report. I think that seeing that earnings report blow out of the water and seeing some of the future expectations for what could still be ahead for this company, I'm excited about it. However, I am also adding this to the watch list knowing this could be uh, hurting my stats in the future because I think expect volatility is definitely something to expect with these companies. So, do you think I should expect a potential maybe hit to my overall watch list success with this one?
I don't really. I think you're catching this one when the pullback's already in play. It might go down a little bit more, but I'm thinking you're going to see a bounce on this one. I really do.
All right, good. Well, I'm glad I chose this one to add to the list. If you haven't checked out Bridget's buys yet, you can follow the progress of how many moves these stocks make over time. I've got a wide variety of names. Every time we do a video, I'm picking one stock to add to that list. You can scan the QR code or click the link to follow along. Again, it's just marketbeat.com/Bridget if you do want to follow along. Thanks again for joining me everyone. Let me know what you think about these companies and if this is the kind of companies that you like to hear about or invest in or research for yourself. I'd love to hear what you think in the comments. Thanks for joining us. As always, happy investing.